Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our session with the President of the Republic of Moldova, Maia Sandu. President Sandu, I welcome you heartily here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We have here for our meeting about 1 hour, a bit less than 1 hour. So I will not introduce the President for too long, but let me just say that all the comments coming from the European Union, from the European side, say for the first time maybe there's a real chance for a pro-European reformist agenda in the Republic of Moldova. And that is a good sign. So you get a lot of support, at least
Indeed.
Support by the European side. As far as your own career is concerned, you have made the decision, obviously, to make a difference in your country politically. Although you come from the side of economics, studied at Harvard, studied also certainly in Chisinau, and worked for the World Bank for some years in Chisinau and in Washington, and then made the decision even to co-start a party, a liberal pro-European party, which won the last elections, the snap elections of 21 of this year, actually. And the report of the European Union on the situation in Moldova is a promising one. I saw the report of about 3 days ago, at the beginning of this week, and the comments also by Mr. Borrell and others was very positive. So we can say that for you, Madam President, it is a positive situation, but at the same time there are a lot of problems. And that's why I'm very happy that we can discuss in this hour with you the situation. And we said beforehand, President Sandu will give a presentation on the European reform path of her country, and then we will have questions and answers on anything you want to discuss, from gas issues maybe to oligarchs or whatever you want to discuss. There are no limits. President Sandu, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here today at the Vienna School of International Studies and to speak about the Republic of Moldova. You are in this room because you are following on and you are interested in what happens in our country, and also because you are future diplomats or already diplomats, and this means that you are following what's happening in our region. But I would like to share some of my thoughts and some of the facts about what has been happening in the Republic of Moldova, and I would like to speak a little bit about our domestic successes, but also problems, about the external challenges and the external policies of the current authorities in Moldova, and then, of course, speak a little bit about the future. You have mentioned some of the elements of my career, and I have to say from the beginning I didn't plan to become a politician. I started as a civil servant very soon after Moldova became independent, so I witnessed the transition of the Republic of Moldova, which is never ending. And I witnessed the reforms that the country has been implementing over the years. The first 10 years of transition, trying all kind of experiments, and then the big poverty indicators that we reached at the end of the first decade of transition. For instance, in the 1999, 70% of Moldovans were below the poverty line. So what happened at the beginning are the lessons that we need to learn and to take into account even now. Moldova has been at the beginning obtaining some of the freedoms, so it did build some democratic processes, but in terms of the economic development, things didn't go very well. And that's why, after several years of experiments, at the beginning of 2000, people decided to go back when poverty reached such unbelievable levels. People decided to vote the Communist Party to power, which was promising to bring the old past. And then, so after the first 10 years of transition, which were very difficult, which had very high social costs, which, by the way, I believe were underestimated, including by our international partners, the IFIs who have been trying to help us do the transition, then we got into almost another 10 years of a communist regime, which brought more stability. There was a little bit of economic development because there was economic development in the region, so the country was benefiting from the economic stability in the region. But also, these were the first years, and I'm talking about the years of 2000, 2009, these were the years when Moldovans started to receive remittances, because at the end of, or at the beginning of the 2000s, because of this huge poverty, because of the failures of the governments to provide for the economic development, for incomes, people started to leave the country. And then in the second decade, we started to receive remittances. And at some point, Moldova was number 1 or number 2 in the world based on the remittances to GDP ratio. So at some point, remittances were like 30% of the GDP, which means that migration remittances became the main poverty coping mechanism for the Moldovans. So the second decade was a little bit better in terms of economic development, but this was not because of good policies by the government, good economic policies by the government, but that's because people actually found an alternative solutions to earn money, and they were actually sending money at home to support their families. And then in 2009, we were all feeling very good when we believed that finally the pro-European political forces came to power, and now things are going to improve. And I was one of those who actually tried to help with that. In 2012, while I was still in Washington, I got the invitation to become the Minister of Education. Initially, I was a bit shocked by that, because I was not coming exactly from the education sector. But then I did see this as an excellent professional challenge. And I did believe, and I continue to believe, that education is very, very important, and that it is worth trying. So while I was trying to do, together with my colleagues in the ministry, to implement reforms in the education sector, we also focused on fighting corruption in education. And just to give you an example, when I became the Minister of Education, the passing rate for the baccalaureate in Moldova, this is the final exam for the high school, was something like 95, 98%. So like everyone who wanted to take the baccalaureate would take it, and I can explain you how this would happen. And then 1 year later, the passing rate dropped to 50%. And that's because we imposed measures to stop cheating and to stop the buying of the diplomas. It was a national tragedy, as you could imagine, suddenly to witness such a drop in the passing rate from 98% to 50%. So a lot of people got upset with me, kids, their parents, the parliament, which tried to take me down 2 years in a row. But then we actually succeeded, and this is one of the things that is still there, because I mean, the exams are proper exams, and the young people who study get their results, and those who do not study, they also get their results. And that was a first example, like at a bigger stage, that we can fight corruption. At the same time, while together with my colleagues in the ministry, we were trying to fight corruption in education and to improve the quality of education, the relevance. We suddenly discovered that in the other part of the government, the banking sector fraud happened. And probably you have heard about that. This has happened. We discovered the fraud in 2015. And just to give you an indication what this was, how big this was, it was 12% of GDP at that time, just one corruption scheme. So, of course, this turned the country upside down, and everybody got very upset. And I myself felt that you cannot continue to fight corruption with an education sector trying to teach kids that it's not good to steal the marks and to pay for your exams, while at the highest level in the country, such corruption schemes happen. There was no doubt that such a corruption scheme could not have happened without the implication of the central bank, of the prosecution, all these institutions which had to prevent this, they were actually part of this corruption. So this is when I left the government after 3 years in the ministry. Of course, very disappointed that things that we have started and the lessons we were trying to teach our kids, that the hard work is being appreciated, everything was just fading away. And then this is when we witnessed huge protests in Moldova, because it's clear, people pay taxes, they hope that their taxes are going to be used to improve the infrastructure, to have new schools and kindergartens and so on. And then you just discover that all these taxes have to go and pay for this hole, which was created in the banking sector because it had to be saved, not to have a collapse of the banking sector. 3 banks were involved in this big corruption scandal. And this is just one example, but this is when we discovered that even though this government, formed of several political parties, was calling itself pro-European, it had nothing to do with the European values. It was just discrediting the European way of governing the country. And that's when me and other people like me realized that there is no one political party in the country we can support, we can vote for, because they just all seem to be corrupt and just lying to the people. So that's when we had a kind of strange idea to try to create a political party from scratch. We didn't really believe at the beginning, I'm going to be very frank, we didn't really believe at the beginning that this was going to work, but we felt that we had to try, because otherwise we would regret if we didn't try. And this was coming, or the idea was coming from the fact that I did have some political capital from my work in the ministry, although I didn't plan to build this political capital, but through the reforms, even though the reforms were very unpopular, so initially people were very upset with us. Lots of people would protest in front of the ministry when we were taking these measures. But slowly, people realized that this is the only way, right way to go forward. So because I had this personal political capital, we decided that maybe we create a political party, and then we see what happens. And then I passed this political capital to a team, and then this team goes on in politics. It was very difficult. We didn't know it was going to be that difficult. We didn't have any experience. We didn't have any money. We didn't have any media coverage and support. So just to tell you how things developed, we established the party. People did come to sign in to be members of the party. But then for 4 years, the party had just one employee, because we could pay the salary just for one employee. Everything else was voluntary work. Like some people would do full-time voluntary work, spending all their savings. And it was not easy also because this was the time of the worst authoritarian and corrupt regime in Moldova, which was led by Plahotniuc, the oligarch that you might have heard. And first, they didn't take us seriously because they said these guys don't have money, they don't have experience, they don't have media, so they are going to just try it and then they're going to give up. So this probably helped us a little bit because otherwise they could have crushed us immediately before we became strong. But it was also very difficult because, as you can imagine, you couldn't meet with people like in public buildings. They would just not allow you. You'll have to have all the meetings outside, even though it was raining or snowing. But that's how we worked. On one hand, being on the streets, protesting against the regime, against its authoritarian and undemocratic decisions and actions. On the other hand, going village by village, talking to people, explaining why the country is in such a bad situation because of these big corruption schemes. And I mentioned just the banking sector fraud, but there is a very long list of huge corruption schemes. Just to tell you, another one which made us famous or infamous is the money laundering. During several years in Moldova, through Moldova passed 20 billion US dollars of money coming from Russia and then going to some other countries, including to some EU countries. And for this laundromat, they used the Moldovan banks and the Moldovan courts, which means paying judges, paying prosecutors, and so on. So actually, this is shortly how we built the party, how we survived, and how we managed to come to power. We had the presidential elections in October-November last year, which I won, and then the same mandate for fighting corruption and reforming justice was supported by people during the parliamentary elections, and now the Party of Action of Solidarity, which together with other people I established, but I'm not a member anymore because by law I cannot be a member of a political party. This party has won 63 seats in the parliament out of 101, and this is a strong mandate for fighting corruption and for reforming justice and for improving governance and for creating jobs, providing economic opportunities. The biggest challenge that we have in Moldova is to make Moldovans believe again in their country, in their state. 1/3 of the population is abroad because they just don't see their future in Moldova because of all the bad things that have happened over the years. And of course, most of them are young people. And if you look at the polls, those who are still in the high school, when they asked what's their plan for the most of them is to leave the country. And we know that we have to work very hard to reverse this, and it's not one policy or two to be done and implemented. It's a lot of things to be done, both in terms of, as I said, justice. This is what the sentiment of injustice brought people together during these elections, presidential and parliamentary elections. You will see that people from the right, people from the left voted for us, people from the center, because they just felt this injustice. So those who have businesses and witness their businesses being taken away illegally, they of course feel this injustice. The pensioners who have a pension which is less than 50 euros per month, even though they worked and contributed at the state for 40 years, they of course feel a big injustice because the money is being stolen, and that's why they can't have an increase in their pension, and so on. So the first thing that is on our agenda is to bring the justice back, for the people to believe in the injustice. But then, of course, to have strong institutions, first of all, institutions which are to prevent and combat and tackle corruption. Going back to the issue of the banking sector fraud, until today, no one single person has been punished for this 12% of GDP fraud, and no one single cent has been recovered. You can imagine how people feel about that. Creating economic opportunities, this is a must, because people in Moldova respect democracy, they fight for democracy, they have proved this over the years again and again, but they also need to have better living standards, incomes and economic development, because otherwise you get a part of the population which believes that democracy is to be blamed for corruption, for poverty, and for migration. And of course, this is not the case. So there are huge challenges ahead of the government, ahead of us, but there is an opportunity, a political opportunity, because for the first time you have this stability, and for the first time, I would say, since independence, you have in the parliament a majority of honest people. And this means that this is a real opportunity to fight corruption and to make justice independent, because when you have members of the parliament who are afraid that they will have to respond for the illegal actions that they've taken, of course they will not support any justice sector reform. I'll stop here, and I haven't talked about the external policies just shortly, but I'm sure that you'll have these questions. We're trying to have a very active external policy, and we're very privileged to see the openness from all the partners. Since the presidential elections, I had the chance to speak to many heads of states and prime ministers, and I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to visit Austria at the invitation of your president, and we had very good discussions here, and we've been trying to relaunch our relationships with all the countries, of course, in the EU, in the West. We're also trying to have good relations with Russia, and we have been indicating that we want to have constructive relationships. Of course, we have a full agenda with some easier and some more complicated issues, but this is our external policy, very active, very transparent, and looking for mutually, mutual respect and interests of the citizens of both countries that we're talking about. And of course, we enjoy a lot of support these days from the EU, from the EU institutions, from some international organizations. But the challenges, of course, are huge. Like the most pressing challenge now is the gas price, which for Moldova means an increase which is 5-6 times than the gas price we were paying 2 months ago. You can imagine how dramatic this is for the economy to adjust to such an increase, how dramatic it is for the people who consume gas, and for the budget, which is trying to help the country, but these costs are really, really huge. So, of course, we can have an entire discussion why Moldova is not ready, why it doesn't have alternative sources, why the previous governments haven't done anything in terms of the energy security, but that's the reality, and this is the big challenge that we're facing today. I'll stop here, and hopefully I left some time for the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, for such an optimistic view on your perspectives that you have, and you said you are happy that the European Union is so supportive of your agenda and your change. Are you really happy with the European Union? The European Union is always promising things. They're putting fact sheets out for countries in the Eastern Partnership. They're speaking about, don't talk about European perspective. Nobody knows how open they really are. So why are you still happy? It's because there is no alternative? Or what is your feeling about the European Union?
Well, first of all, and we can, of course, find some issues that happened in the past, but in general terms, I would like to say that the EU has been very supportive when Moldova was going through very difficult times. And when I say supportive, I mean supportive with respect to the citizens. The EU has encouraged us to fight for democracy. The EU has encouraged the Moldovan citizens not to give up when we were dealing with a very authoritarian and corrupt regime. And we do appreciate it because the EU knew what was happening in Moldova. The EU used its tribune to talk about it. It was very frank in its declarations. So even though we had a regime which would call itself pro-European, the EU didn't buy that. The EU was saying, you're doing bad things at home, you're not respecting people's rights, you're not respecting the democratic processes and so on. And this is very important. And I think this is something important for us and for other countries in our region, especially if we talk about the Eastern Partnership, because one thing that I've learned over the years, over these 3 decades, is that development takes time. We might want to build a democratic society very quickly and enjoy it, but it takes time, and we go back and forth. It's important not to feel that you're left alone, that you gave up on you, even when you are in a very dark situation, like where we were 4 years ago. So this was important to us. And if we talk about the perspective, I'm trying to be very realistic here. First of all, I understand the domestic politics of the EU countries. We can't ignore that, and we see what's happening. So we cannot make statements which is going to make even more difficult the domestic dialogue in each country. We know now that we have to do our homework. We have an association agreement, but we have still lots of commitments that have to be implemented. And these commitments are not just towards EU, these are commitments towards our citizens, because our citizens want better governance. Our citizens, first of all, want a state which protects them from corruption. Our citizens want better living standards. Our citizens want institutions which protect their rights and the democratic processes. So we actually have a lot to do in terms of our homework. And I think when you do your homework, then you can come back and say, okay, we've done that, and we believe that we should advance in our dialogue. But when you have lots of issues at home and you just go and speak that you deserve more, you're not very credible. And then it's difficult for the EU as a whole, as I said, with different countries, with their domestic politics, to explain to their taxpayers, to their citizens, why a country which has not been seen as doing enough to align to the EU values should be granted more than that. So this shouldn't be understood that, we don't want the perspective. We just want to be realistic, and we believe that there are many things that we can do in the meantime, and we do count on EU support, including in dealing with this energy crisis, but in helping us improve infrastructure, in helping us improve governance, in helping us reform justice sector. So we actually believe that we can get there, but by making all the right steps at home.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for explaining us what you mean by European promise. That's a promise from your side more than from the European Union side. Yes.
I've been traveling around and talking to many EU countries, because I think it is important to, first of all, for the people to know us better, but also for them to know what we're doing in reality, and for them to see the real progress on the ground. I think this is what's going to help us in our dialogue with the EU countries and with the EU institutions.
We already have questions, Madam President, from on the internet. The first question concerns the euro. Why didn't you follow the Montenegro success story of unilaterally backing the euro in your country? So as a euro, as a tool to bypass EU rejectionism as far as the candidate status is concerned.
Well, so the question is why we didn't adopt the euro?
Yes.
Well, I just tried to explain you what was our story until now, and you can imagine that there was no space for discussion on this specific issue. So we were trying to deal with more serious problems, and the EU integration agenda was being hijacked again and again because of the domestic problems. Otherwise, from now on, of course, we'll have more chances to talk about the elements of integration.
And there is a second question, also a big question. What is your position on Transnistrian conflict? Is there anything different in your approach to your predecessors?
On Transnistrian conflict resolution, there are important principles that I would like to reiterate here. First of all, the solution should be peaceful, diplomatic. This is the most important. The solution should respect the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the country, and the solution should result in a functional state. What I mean by that is the solution should not destabilize the country. These are the three main important elements of the solution as we see it. And of course, we would like to find a solution. We believe that the solution should be developed at home, and then of course discussed, including in the 5+2 format with the other parties, but it should be developed at home. And it should be done, developing the solution should be done at the same time with strengthening the institutions on the right bank. We all understand that the reintegration is a complicated process, it's a complex process, and to be able to do it properly, you do need to have strong institutions. Today, unfortunately, I'll put it very bluntly, Moldovan institutions are still very weak. They are vulnerable because of the corruption that has been happening in our country for so many years. So we do need, while we look for the solution, try to develop it, while we try to find internal consensus for the solution and support from the 5+2, we also need to strengthen the institutions on the right bank for them to be able actually to deal with the reintegration. I think this is very important.
May I add, do you have special channels to people on the Transnistrian side that you can use as a person?
I don't have special channels because unfortunately I cannot travel to the left bank because of the problems we have. But I have to say that even though I didn't campaign there, in the presidential elections I got 15%, 15, you might think is not much, but still, these people voted for me even though they didn't have a chance to talk to me. I didn't have a chance to share, our political materials with them. They don't necessarily have access to the media, but of course there is internet, and this is how people got the information. And to us, this is encouraging, because to us, this is a sign that people get interested in reality in what happens on the right bank. And I also believe that the more successful the government is going to be on improving the living standards on the right bank, the more interest is going to increase among the people on the left bank to actually support the reunification.
Madam President, if I may, before I open the floor, I simply ask one huge question. On the one hand, you have your Romanian brothers. So one could say there is a chance already to become Europeanized, Westernized, EU member country. On the other hand, you have your Russian brothers, which have a different model, and they are also offering this model to Gagauzia, to Transnistria. So where are you between these two models, actually?
Well, we have stated it very clearly that we believe that the European model of development is the right model for Moldova, and this is what we're trying to build. We do want to have good relations with Russia, and we do not see why us choosing the European model of development should impede us having good relations with Russia. At least on our part, we'll do our best to have this constructive dialogue. But we do want to, as I said, to pursue the European model of development. This is, and this is also supported by the Moldovan people. If you look at the latest polls, there is a very big increase in the number of people who support the European model of development. And we have been always saying this openly, so that's not a secret. But if we talk about geopolitics, one thing that helped us in these elections was trying not to focus on geopolitics, because geopolitics in Moldova has always been used in elections to get votes, regardless of the value of the program and of the people who were trying to get into the parliament or in power. So because geopolitics has been such a dividing issue for all these, during all these decades, we made an effort to come to an agenda for the elections and then beyond the elections now, of course, which would focus on the important issues for the people, fighting corruption, no matter whether you are looking towards the West or looking towards the East. People don't like to live in a corrupt country where money is being stolen from the state budget or the state assets are being stolen. Job opportunities, justice. So these things actually brought people together. And it is very important to unite the society around these huge challenges if you want to succeed. You do need the popular support. That's why we refused to explore the geopolitics and then to say the Romanians, the Europeans, the pro-Russians. We just said we want to build a society for everyone, for all the honest people of the country who work hard and deserve to have a better life.
Will be hard to avoid geopolitics.
We're not saying geopolitics is not there, but we don't want to speculate it politically as it has been speculated for years in the past by irresponsible politicians just to get in power, to scare people and to get in power regardless of the problems that they had, these political parties and these politicians.
If I may collect a few questions, Madam President, start with Stella Avalone.
I'm Stella Avalone, the Austrian ambassador to Moldova, and I was present yesterday in all the talks, and almost all interlocutors were enthusiastic about your energy to tackle all the problems that are ahead of you and the team of your leadership. And I have two questions with regard to the reforms. For one, of course, the justice sector is one of the high priorities. You have at the moment a team of the Council of Europe in Moldova in order to prepare the legal basis for the vetting of judges. But I have a more general question. There were heavy debates before the early elections on the dissolution of the parliament and also on the decisions that were taken by the Constitutional Court. Do you intend some sort of constitutional reform as well? That's the first question. And you also mentioned the media. We have media of different quality in Moldova. Do you intend to set some activities in order to enhance the quality of media in Moldova?
May I collect a few questions? Yes, please. Yeah.
Madam President, thanks a lot, not only for your presentation here, but also most of all for what you do. I'm teaching Southeast European politics at Central European University, the University of Belgrade, so I have a lot of students from countries such as Hungary or Serbia who feel in a semi-authoritarian mafia state and don't know whether they ever will come out. And you, President Sandu, you are a ray of hope, not only in Moldova, but also beyond for those who know about you. Now, I'm afraid that this fairy tale episode might sooner or later come to an end. And we know from history that these fairy tales have always disappointed us in the end of the day. You have massive opposition from huge business interests in Moldova. I don't need to tell you. You told us about. You are in a very difficult, challenging geopolitical situation. And we could imagine that sooner or later you will face massive pressures to give up your reforms and to compromise domestically and internationally, or being ousted from political office. And with the Transnistria conflict still going on, this might not only be about you being ousted from office, but this might also maybe have as a consequence the loss of human lives. And I'm in this under these massive pressures which are on you, there is nobody else better privileged to answer the question, what should we be more afraid of? That you make compromises on your reform program, or that you are being ousted from office because you're too ambitious?
That's a very, very direct question. Maybe you should have a chance to answer. Maybe you should have a chance to answer these two questions. Yeah.
On the constitutional reform, no. At this time, we're not planning any constitutional reform. We have plenty of other issues to solve. And the vetting of judges and prosecutors, this is going to be the main issue on the agenda. And we get support from the Council of Europe and European Union. And we do hope that the external extraordinary evaluation of judges and prosecutors will start in the next few months. This is very important. With respect to media, this is a big issue. It's not that the state can do a lot, because this is a sensitive issue. If you interfere too much, then it's about the freedom of speech. If you don't do anything, it's a lot of fake news and manipulation, and unfortunately in Moldova, we have a lot of it. I actually won the presidential elections despite a lot of fake news, and I think that's because, I think this happened because there was too much fake news. So it was not, they didn't know how to balance it, how to size it, because when it's too much fake news, then people realize that something was wrong with this fake news. I think this is how I actually managed to win the presidential elections despite that many. But one thing that we have to do, the parliament has to do, and I think the parliament has announced this, is to make the Audiovisual Council working, because until now, the Audiovisual Council, the people there have been working either for one political party or for another political party. They would get paid illegally, and then they would support the media which are of these political parties. Now you have a government which doesn't have any media, because it's the first political party which doesn't have media, because they don't have money. And to have media, you need to, in Moldova, you need to, as a political party, you need to steal money to pay for it. So we do expect the Audiovisual Council to start doing its job, but we also need to learn from other countries. How do we face this issue of fake news and manipulation? How do we teach kids in the school? How do we teach the general public? Because this is a very big threat to democracy. We know this is a problem even for established democracies, but in a country like mine, this is even a bigger problem. With respect to the bright future that you have described for me, I haven't made compromises that compromise until now, and that's not an issue. The challenges are very big, and many things can happen. As I said, like the biggest challenge now is with energy prices. If they go up, of course, people are going to get upset. And it's difficult to explain to them that this is just a shock that happens to the international market, and there is not much that the government can do. So this is going to be like, things like this are going to create impediments to the smooth implementation of the reform agenda. But in general, and yes, of course, there is always the risk. You see it even, again, in the established democracies, that things can go wrong. For a country like mine, development takes time. So, of course, we want to make irreversible changes so that when the power changes, that some of these things will remain, like the baccalaureate that I said. Many of the reforms that we implemented in the Ministry of Education were not continued. But there is one thing, the most important, which is still there, because it was that big, it was that visible to the public, that those who came after us were just afraid to eliminate this exam, or to go back to having a corrupt exam. So there are always things like that, but we have to do our best, and we are going to do our best. And as I said, it's for the first time that Moldova has a majority in the parliament which is formed of honest people. This is a tremendous opportunity. It has a good government. There is an issue of capacity, because people left the country, and it's pretty difficult to find people to bring them into the state institutions. This has been a real challenge for now. I mean, for us, we've been talking to people in diaspora, in private sector, to try to convince them to come and work for the state. Actually, the quality of the civil service has been damaged over the last 10 years. I can tell you, compared to the times I was Minister of Education, and even at that time things were not very good. But because of this corrupt regime, the good people left state institutions, the good professionals, and some of them were used for these corruption schemes, and they were compromised. So, now we have to clean this up and rebuild some of the institutions from scratch. And it's a pity, because it's difficult to build a good quality civil service. But, we will continue. Of course, the external challenges are the biggest threats, and we'll have to be very careful, very cautious. We will rely on our international partners. That's why I'm here, to make friends. Or to strengthen the friendship. That's why I'm having so many other visits and meetings, because Moldova is a small country. It's very vulnerable, and we do count on this friendship and partnership when difficult times come.
I have a few arms raised around here, I think. Yes, Mr. Sepic, Mr. Grauchenberg. Yeah.
Pleasure of working for Moldinkom Bank as a president of the supervisory board the last 2 years. The problem that we see is that the old corrupt system still is very strong through the legal system. So the core issue, what I would like to pinpoint, is you can solve many of your problems at the time if you are able to solve your legal problems. I mean, we got jeopardized almost every month by the old system with muddy measures you can't believe. So that's still going on. Second, I hardly found anywhere in the countries I've been working in Central and Eastern Europe so intelligent people. It's a pity that they're all leaving. How can you get them back? You have to get investment into your country. Investment you only get when you get the legal system in order, and then it will come. You have a lot of brainy people, as I call them, and I would love to lead investment into Moldova, because the people are there, and once they see they have a future in a system that really works properly, then they will stay. I mean, who wants to leave if she or he can stay in the country? So please, all the good luck in the reforms of the legal system.
Yes, please. Mr. Grauchenberg.
Grauchenberg, Institute of the Danube Region, Central Europe. I have a short question on the COVID situation. How could you manage the crisis? What about the vaccination? Thank you.
COVID. And again, the Institute for the Danube area, Mr. Schäfer.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we've been following at our institute your development, and it's been quite impressive. And I don't want to paint a grim picture. So my question is rather concerning the possibilities of cooperation beyond the honest majority, as you called it, in the parliament. How is the working together with the opposition parties, especially also with your predecessor, and the platform that was formed together for the parliamentary election with Voronin and the Communist Party? And the second tiny question, maybe, you mentioned the big challenges and the big need for reforms, but what would be one of the lesser known aspects that you think is necessary to be changed to keep the European development of Moldova?
Maybe, Madam President, you would like to respond?
Yes. On the justice, I'm really sorry that you continue to face these issues, and I do believe you, and this is what I hear from other business people, and this is what I hear from even from state institutions which are facing this issue, and that's why we're insisting on having the vetting so soon. I mean, quickly, because sometimes the Council of Europe experts say, well, you shouldn't be in a hurry. But then if we don't do this fast enough, then we lose investors, we delay the economic development. And you know, the vetting, what we are proposing is the external, extraordinary evaluation of judges and prosecutors. And there are two criteria that have to be used. One is the incomes. So if the judges and prosecutors cannot provide an explanation of the origin of their assets and accounts, this is a clear sign of corruption. So where did you get the money? This is very important. And second, some of the decisions that they have made to be evaluated by judges. These are two criteria. So those who come clean, they can stay in the system and continue to work. Without that, we'll continue to see things that you're mentioning, and this has a tremendous damage to the country, to the reputation, to the business environment, and you know, the economic development is just doesn't happen the way it should happen. And then, as you say, people don't have jobs, people leave, and we have all these consequences. That's why we insist so much on this law. On the COVID and vaccination, the situation is not that good. We have something around 34% probably of vaccinated people, which is very low. We're very grateful for the fact that we have access now to the vaccine, and yesterday we announced that there is going to be a donation from Austria. Very much appreciated. The problem is that, again, there has been too much fake news, and people are not taking the vaccines, and this is where the new government needs to do a much better job to try to increase the vaccination rate. We are now on the fourth wave. It is very worrisome. The health sector is still capable to deal with it, but of course, if this continues and if there is a new increase, I mean a continuous increase, then this is going to put a very big pressure. And at the same time, you should know that Moldova is probably the only country which, during the COVID situation, the private sector didn't get any support from the state. That was, you know, before the government changed. Now the new government has been trying to provide some support to small businesses, but you can imagine and you can compare how much support your businesses here received, and in Moldova there was no support whatsoever. So the poor businesses, in addition to the problems they have with justice, they had to cope by themselves only with this COVID situation. So now the government is trying to help, but we'll see how things develop. We need to improve the vaccination rate very quickly. On the cooperation with opposition, you know, I do understand how democracy works. I do see in most of the European countries majorities in the parliament, and I do believe that this is how things should develop. But the majorities should be done, can be done with political parties which are political parties, not groups which represent corruption groups. Because you cannot do anything good for the country when you start negotiating with a group which represents a corrupt gang. By the way, one good thing that happened already after the parliamentary elections is that all big crooks left Moldova. They moved away, fearing that there might be the reforms in justice and in prosecution. It doesn't mean that they gave up on the idea to extract money from Moldova. It doesn't mean that all corruption schemes have been closed down. But the fact that they are out of the country is already encouraging. But, you know, we had situations in the past when members of the parliament will change political parties 4 times during one mandate. And not for free, not because their ideology would change from one week to another. It's just because somebody would pay the person and would move to one political party, and then would pay a bigger amount and would move to another. This has discredited the parliament. So what we need to do now is to enforce the legislation on funding transparently and legally the political party. We have established the first political party which is financed legally and transparently. When I first went out to the people to tell them that we want to create a political party because you're asking us to create a political party, but you'll have to make small donations for the party to exist, people got upset with me. They said, wait a minute, you want to do politics and you want us to pay for that? Because until then, and that was 2015, 2016, people in Moldova didn't know where the money for political parties would come from. They were out of, you know, their interest. And then we started to educate them. And initially, the contributions to the political party were coming from the pensioners, those who have a pension smaller than 50 euros per month, and they were coming to make donations because everybody else was afraid of the government to make donations. We would make everything transparent. So we will publish the list of donors, and if you work for the state and you make a donation to our party, then you will be fired. If you have a business and you make a donation for our political party, they will send the tax inspectorate and the others to harass you. So the only free people in Moldova were the pensioners. And we started to create the political party with the pensioners. But now we proved that in Eastern Europe you can create a political party which is financed totally transparently and legally. And this is what should happen with regard to the other political parties, because corruption starts in politics. If you use big money, dirty money, money stolen from the state to finance your political party, then when you get into high-level positions, then you try to, to get reimbursed, which means implementing corruption schemes and get back your so-called investment. So we will be, and we want to have coalitions in the government and to work with the rest of the political parties, but they all have to be real political parties, which means being financed transparently, legally, representing the people, not some people with huge amounts of money which invest in these parties just to promote their selfish interests.
That was, again, a very political answer. Presidents normally, in the European sense, they are representing only their countries, yes, but don't talk about politics too much. Sometimes they have to. But in your case, it is a political job.
It is a political job, but I do want us to have political parties which represent the people, not criminal groups. Because then it's going to be easier to have these majorities in the parliament. It's going to be easier to make compromises on issues. I want the political parties to discuss on whether we spend more money on education or whether we spend more money on, roads, and not to have the discussions as political parties would have in the past, when they would just distribute. You take the prosecution and you take the Center for Fighting Corruption. This is what the majorities were about in Moldova before, and this is wrong. It's not about you controlling the institutions and then doing whatever you want with the sculptured institutions. And that's not just about one political party. I want, and I believe that this is how it should be done. All the political parties should be financed legally, transparently, and Moldovan institutions have to be strong enough to prevent things that have happened in the past.
I can take a last round of questions. At least there is one. So there's one more question. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Lawrence Kettle, the Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy. First of all, I want to talk about or ask you about the changes in the security and defense architecture in Moldova and fighting corruption within that sphere. Obviously, it's quite a bit of a problem, as is corruption in various other parts of the Moldovan sector. Now, admittedly, I haven't read the Moldovan constitution for a while, so you'll forgive me, but I believe neutrality, like with Austria, is enshrined in the constitution. Yes. So obviously you have no intention to join NATO, but as you have an intention to join the European Union, you will be part of things like the security defense architectures, the Common Security and Defense Policy, and PESCO, and these other mechanisms, much like Austria is. So my question is, what are the practical steps that are being taken to fight corruption in the security and defense sector in Moldova? And for those of us as researchers in security and defense and activists who believe Moldova's place is in the European Union, what can we do to make your job easier?
Well, of course, the security institutions, the defense sector have been also made vulnerable by corruption because people were used for political purposes to deal with the opposition and so on. So this has made them weaker, and actually security is one of the areas, the new areas, where we just requested support from the EU, because finally EU has this type of support. It's a new type of support, and we said that we want this. We want EU to help us do the evaluation of our security sector to see where are the biggest vulnerabilities, and then see how it can help fixing them. So this is going to be part of the EU support program. Of course, we have other partners as well, and we had them in the past. It's just that when the governments were not really focusing on strengthening the sector, the security sector, then of course the efficiency of the support was not very big. This is something where, as by constitution, by law, I have more power. So this is one of the reforms that I will have to lead or to supervise from the presidential office. But yes, we have to see what exactly the EU can offer, and we're very interested. As I said, corruption is a national security threat to the country because it has undermined the institutions to an extent that, these institutions are not functional, cannot deal with internal threats or external threats. So this is an urgent matter to deal with.
But he asked about neutrality also.
Yeah,
in
neutrality
the
is, yeah, exactly.
How important is it? Was this a compromise because of the Russians, or
well, I was not in the parliament at the time. I was just somewhere civil servant in the Ministry of Economy when the constitution was adopted. It was in the constitution, put in the constitution from the very beginning, and it's been there and it stays there, so there is no discussion about it.
As an Austrian, we are interested because we also have our neutrality.
We know that.
And yes, there was some sort of input from the Russian side on why we declared neutrality.
Well, I was not part of the team which we decided on that, so I'll not be able to elaborate, but we can find out what was the story.
Yeah, we will see in the future.
It's probably related to the Transnistrian conflict. And
There was one more question, if you allow. Yes, please.
Felix Meyerhofer. Mrs. President, I'm very sorry about my question, but I just found in the internet that your annual income as president was less than $10,000. Now, I don't know whether this is true, but how can you cope with that?
Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, for 4 years, I worked for no income whatsoever because, as I said, I did full-time, well, it was 3 years and a half. I did work full-time to create the party, and it was full-time voluntary work. I was lucky before coming to Moldova to work for the World Bank for 2 years, where I had a very good salary. I made significant savings. And my savings, I've been using the savings over the last 10 years. Of course, I had some salary at the ministry, which was like $500 at that time. And now my salary is about 600 euros, I guess. Yes. Yeah, 700 euros. Of course, this is not much, but then, of course, if you compare to the salaries of other people in Moldova, you have to work hard first to have enough money to increase the salaries of teachers, to increase the salaries of health workers, and then you can talk about the salaries of the high-level officials. But I've been coping with this situation, including because my savings were good enough, so the work at the World Bank helped me a lot, beyond the 2 years that I spent there.
Madam President, thank you for these frank answers. I remember when you gave your speech in front of the General Assembly, you were also very outspoken about, recently your country was a captured state, you said, I think. Yes. How much democracy plays a role for your country. You talked about corruption. So I think we should all thank the President for being frank here, and also wish her all the best for the pro-European Western way that we, I guess, in this room very strongly support. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that.